This mid-century orange vinyl accent chair with a maple frame sat in a hospital waiting room from the time it was new until the 1990s when it was discarded. It was designed by Jan Kuipers for the Imperial Furniture Company in Stratford, Ontario. If that sounds familiar to you, it might be because 3 months ago I made a video where I refinished this end table by the same designer. Of course, kept in a public place, you might expect some vandalism. Someone scratched into the arm with a pen. The split in the vinyl is just from age, and a couple of the mortise and tenons have come unglued. The backrest is upholstered with a slipcover that's done up with a zipper. But the seat cushion is upholstered by stretching the fabric over a frame and cushioning and stapling it to the underside. A couple of the legs are pretty badly beaten up. I'll probably just sand those smooth. This chair must have been really bright when it was brand new. The plastic container keeps magically reappearing because it's really important to keep track of all of the hardware. Here's a nice shot of the label that helped me to identify where the chair came from. And right next to it is a wad of waiting room chewing gum. I'm pretty sure that my kids wouldn't have put it there, which means that it was sitting under the chair for the last 30 years that we've had it in our house. And it still smelled like cinnamon. I've been contemplating duplicating this chair, and so was really looking at the form, and it's actually very beautifully designed and a lot more complex than it appears at first glance. On the inside of the chair frame where the mortises meet the tenons, there were nail holes and a couple of them had fallen out, so I decided to replace those. I didn't have nails of the right length, but I did have the right thickness, and so I just cut them down and put them in the chair frame. I also decided to replace the metal chair feet. Sometimes when you're taking an old finish off, scraping is a really easy way to do it. And this came off moderately easily, but I could tell I was going to have to sand it anyway. So I actually just jumped to using the sander. I think I used first 100 grit, then 150, and then finally 220. In the hard to reach places I used a detail sander and finished it up by hand. I used a router with a straight cutting bit and a quick clamp to act as a stop block to take off the part of the arm that had been scratched with the ballpoint pen. The arm is so narrow that it wasn't a very stable platform for the router, and so the surface of the area that I routed out was a little bit rough. So I sanded it flat. And I used a chisel to clean up the edge. I cut this Dutchman patch from a piece of maple that I know I've had for 37 years. Here I'm tracing the profile of the chair arm on the underside of the patch, and then I'll take it to the bandsaw and cut it out just slightly larger than the line. After making sure the piece is a good fit, I apply lots of glue and then clamp it in place. It's a teeny bit thicker than it needs to be, and it sticks out on both sides and at the end, and I correct that with the sander. I keep track of my progress more by feel than by eye. I make wood filler by mixing the sawdust with some wood glue. Relatively speaking, I don't have a lot of subscribers, but I can tell you that knowing that people will be watching my videos motivates me to make the best videos I can, which means that I really enjoy the process. If you like what you see, please click subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, but it means that whenever I post a new video, you'll know. I really appreciate it, and thanks to the people who've already subscribed. And when the wood filler is dried and sanded, I use a stain and polyurethane in one that's called Golden Oak. One of my viewers asked why I don't stain first and then use a clear polyurethane, and the truth is it's just very simple to use, and if I find something that I like, I tend to use it in a whole bunch of situations, partly because it's on hand and I don't want to have a whole bunch of finishes sitting around in my workshop, but partly because I'm not a purist, and if it works, I'm happy to use it. I think I applied 4 coats in the end. I took the vinyl off the seat back first. I had actually already taken a peek in there, and I knew that the foam was getting quite old and deteriorated. It's yellow and a little bit sticky. I used the old piece as a template to trace onto the new piece and marked it out with a Sharpie and then cut it with a bread knife. A number of YouTube upholsterers had suggested this, and I really couldn't believe how easily it worked. This foam is 4 inches thick, so it takes several passes to get all the way through it. I went back to my workshop to put on another coat of polyurethane, and when I came back, I found this all over the floor. I asked around, and Danny said he had no idea who did it. My special guest star for this video is my wife Chris. She's about 1,000 times better sewer than I am. While Chris sewed the upholstery, Danny kept his eye out for anyone who might take liberties with our foam. One of the pieces of burlap webbing had torn free from its staples, and there wasn't enough length to staple it back down again, and the end was frayed, which made it very difficult. So I lengthened it by sewing a piece of artist's canvas to it. I can sew just with about 0.1% of Chris's skill and efficiency. I lifted up the covering where the broken webbing had come loose and pulled it through, stapled it down, and cut it off. When Chris had finished sewing the upholstery covers, I put the plywood backing in and worked on getting the foam in place. Chris made an improvement on the original design by sewing a little pocket to hide the pull. The seat cushion fabric is not just a flat piece that gets stretched over the foam and frame. It is a casing that is in the shape of a shallow box. I put the parts in the casing and then stretched the fabric over it all and stapled it down. The wood of the frame is quite hard, and the staples weren't being fired all the way in with the stapler, so I hammered them in. No, back up. The trick to stapling the fabric down evenly is to start in the center of one side, then staple the opposite side with equal tension. Then staple the adjacent sides in the same way. After the initial staples on all four sides, you'll be stapling two fasteners on either side of the previous staples with each turn. While stretching the fabric towards you, also pull towards the corners away from the center. If your cushion is not square, as this one is not, you'll need to work in some extra staples on the long side so that the staples on every side meet in the corners at the same time. I was going to staple some black fabric ticking to the bottom of the seat, and in much the same way as the original manufacturers had, but Chris suggested it would look nicer with a matching piece of fabric that had finished edges, and in retrospect I agree. The back is held in place with bolts that are received by threaded and pronged T-nuts. I located them and poked a hole in the fabric with an awl to guide me. This beautifully designed chair was getting a little shabby and needed an update. If you haven't already, click like, click subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments.